So the slide deck didn't come through.
That's fine.
All right.
We're not Wi-Fi here is no bueno. So we have no slides?
No, we do. I don't, like, I was going to try to put them up.
Here, I have them on my phone if you just want to. Well,
Are they have PDF?
Okay. Yeah, go.
Yeah. All right, we're good.
What's a PowerPoint?
What's that?
PPTX.
No, that's fine. It's not so much I need to read all the slides. I just want to have.
Yeah. So if it freezes, the password's 0506.
Good to know.
Or you just hand it to me and I'll do it for you.
That works. All right, I'm going to start it. We are 11:18. We might go a minute over. You guys ready?
Yep.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone here is for when machines betray the mission, Agentic AI and weaponization for DoD operational technology. If you're not, coffee is that way. It's just in the wrong corner. It's a joke. It's okay. We're good. I'm an attorney. You get lots of jokes out of me. So first and foremost, good morning. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate everybody being here. This is an incredibly important topic and one that we're very excited to present because of the criticality of it. My name is Michael McLaughlin. I co-lead the cybersecurity and data privacy practice group at the law firm of Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney. And joining me today are Miss Allison King of Forescout Technologies and Miss Catherine Wang of Sandbox AQ. Second question, can everyone hear me? Excellent, because if this goes out and I have to use my command presence and speak, I'm happy to do so. I did 15 years in the Navy as a counterintelligence officer, and I'm not above yelling at sailors, so I can happily yell at all of you as well. What we've come here today, which again, critically important, it's the urgent and evolving landscape of AI and the use of AI and the convergence of AI and continuous convergence of AI with operational technology. Over the past decade, and really extending even beyond that, but our warfighters have come to rely far more on critical or digital technology and those dependencies far more than they have on the boots that they wear, far more than the aircraft that are in the sky, far more than the ships or the logistics platforms that we see on the sea every day. The very backbone of the War Department now includes networks, it includes automation and sophisticated algorithms, and yes, of course, artificial intelligence. With this transformation comes not only great opportunity for us to really bring the War Department into the future, but it also carries with it significant risk. And it's risk that our adversaries are exploiting every single day. Systems that we trust, systems that we depend on, they're increasingly target for our greatest and most sophisticated adversaries. So the question becomes, what happens when the machines that we come to rely on, those systems that absolutely support the mission, what happens when they fail? What happens when they become exploitable? What happens when the decision-making process that we begin to outsource to machines becomes the very thing that's targeted by our adversary? And as we move forward, we're going to say some things that are probably intended to elicit a response, but it's for a reason. We do have solutions in mind, so it's not just all paint it black and then walk away as a mic drop. So bear with us. From an operational technology perspective, of course, the things that I'm referring to, we're talking about the physical, we're talking about the industrial, the mission critical systems that we truly rely on, from power grids to the systems that are automating our ship processes, to the decision-making processes that commanders are coming more and more to rely on from an AI perspective. When you combine the physical mission with AI and the adoption of agentic AI in particular, the things that are running our bases, our ships that are providing those logistics functions, you begin to see the emerging threat landscape that we're here to address. And we're focusing on this now, again, because our adversaries are actively targeting this space. As of this morning, how many people follow ransomware? Just hands up. Anybody? Anybody interested in ransomware at all? Yeah. So ransomware, typically, when we talk about ransomware, we're talking about criminal activity, right? We're talking about economic advantage. We're talking about cybercrime, people that are looking to make a buck off of either extortion or selling, leaking the data. But what happens when ransomware groups and our nation's most sophisticated adversaries all of a sudden start to align or overlap? Or you happen to have people moonlighting from SVR, FSB, China's MSS, or 2PLA moonlighting as these ransomware groups, using the same sophisticated tools in an effort to not only undermine our trust in our systems, not only in an effort to try to make it more difficult for us to use our legal processes to chase them down, but in an effort to actually steal the data that we're coming to rely on. And this isn't far-fetched. This happened this morning. So the Everest ransomware group just targeted one of the largest electric operators in Sweden. What's important about Sweden, other than the fact that it's a Nordic country on the Baltics, right? Not in the Indo-Pacom AOR, but it's a country that Russia is very keenly interested in ensuring that we don't have a footprint in, or that it maintains control over, because the Baltic states and the Nordic countries in particular are of critical interest. But what else? We've got 13 facilities in Sweden, US military. We use it for staging troops. We use it for supply depots. We use it for staging and storing our ammunition and other types of weapons, all of which rely on the Swedish power grid. 280 gigabytes was exfiltrated by this group, Everest, which has known ties to Russian SVR and Russian FSB. The data that was taken, though it hasn't been made public, the data that was taken was directly tied to credentials and the overall network architecture of their operational technology. This isn't just personal information. This isn't just social security numbers or national IDs. This is an active incident by a nation state using proxies to target critical infrastructure and operational technologies in one of our allies. This isn't going to go away, and it's only going to continue to converge the more and more we rely on agentic AI. So on that happy note, let's talk about a simple idea. Here's the simple idea. One that I say is simple because it's easy for me to literally say it, but actually living it out and putting it into operational practice is much more difficult. And here's the statement. The strength of our warfighter now extends far beyond the battlefield. In concept, it's easy. And we think about this, well, of course, you've got families at home. We've got our supply chains. We have got all of the critical dependencies that we've come to rely on from a critical infrastructure perspective to operational technology. What it really means, though, is every single mission, every deployment, every decision that's made is now backed by layers upon layers of digital infrastructure, all of which we have outsourced to the private sector. Those layers, the networks, the communications, the logistics systems, they have become just as essential to the mission as the rifles, the jets, and the ships that we're fielding every single day. And each of these systems, from supply chains to C3 networks, each one of them is a dependency. And every single one of those dependencies, that's an opportunity for our adversaries to exploit those systems. Our adversaries know this. They don't need to hit a base. They don't need to take down a satellite. They don't need to hit one of our cruisers or one of our carriers or even take out our logistics ships. All they have to do is disrupt our operations by compromising an electric grid, something that powers the base, compromising the downlink from one of our satellites into a base station. And the industrial controllers that keep our hangars running on Guam and making sure that our B-21s, our F-22s are able to fly, all of that relies and rides on operational technology. So the attack surface is stretching from the battlefield all the way back to the factory floor. And it's something that we have largely ignored from an operational technology perspective. We've been very focused on the IT systems, very focused on the confidentiality aspect of that CIA triad. We're missing out on the integrity. We're missing out on the availability, both of which we've seen our adversaries target. So I want you to think about what's sitting on those operational systems. Certainly classified mission plans. And we definitely need to ensure the confidentiality of those, but what else? Well, the C3 data, ISR feeds. Again, we're focusing on confidentiality. How about targeting and fire control data? It's no longer about just what data are we keeping confidential, but what happens when you inject bad data into AI and machine learning that's making decisions for targeting. It's not a matter of being off by a few inches. Now you're talking about being off by hundreds of miles and hitting the wrong buildings. That creates a significant issue if we go into a hot war and suddenly we can't control where our bombs fall or our cruise missiles land. And what about logistics and sustainment? Anybody who's done UNREPs in the Navy knows and is keenly familiar, keenly aware of the importance and criticality of timing for doing underway replenishments. What happens if your logistics ships are vectored to the wrong place? How quickly will that cruiser, that destroyer, run out of gas? How long can an aircraft carrier operate if it doesn't have sufficient JP5? These types of dependencies, they're constantly being targeted, and it's something that our adversaries are very keenly aware of and continue to look for. And then we get to the authentication of crypto assets. And I don't mean Bitcoin, so relax. We're not going to get any advice here. What I'm talking about is cryptography, right? When we talk about whether it's the authentication mechanisms that we're using to ensure that people have the proper people have access to devices, or that we have proper connections between machine to machine. One of the major challenges we have is what I like to call the Russian nesting doll. We put credentials inside credentials to protect those credentials from other credentials. What's the inherent vulnerability? If you're putting credentials inside a box and you're protecting that box with credentials, and then you put that box into another box and you're protecting that box with credentials, inherently you're still relying on the protection and security of credentials at one point to ensure that your most vulnerable systems or your critical dependencies remain secure. Our adversaries are looking at how do we protect our credentials at the top level. And what they're finding out is typically it's Active Directory, and that's it. So these are the types of critical dependencies. In each of the domains that we're talking about, each one of them has been targeted or is currently being targeted by an active campaign. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Volt Typhoon. Volt Typhoon, I think as many people know, Chinese MSS targeting the electric grid. I'm here to tell you, you do not target the electric grid for espionage. Nobody cares about how much power you're pulling off the grid. You do that for pre-positioning of weapons. And you do that to try to shut down operational capabilities. Ironically, our warfighting strength today is digital. It's distributed, it's interdependent, which is good in a lot of ways because it protects from a security standpoint, but it also means that it's inherently fragile. The challenge for military leaders is to understand and identify what are our hidden dependencies before the adversary does. So as we move forward, I'm going to take this a couple layers deeper so we can really better understand the problem itself, understand if every dependency is a potential target, what exactly are the dependencies made of? What are the data types? What are the systems? And what are the relationships that define the operational backbone? So going one layer deeper, what you're looking at here is an ecosystem. And this is an ecosystem that underpins every mission, every deployment, every operational decision that we make. From the foundations, your data centers, your industrial controls, the logistics pipelines, all the way up to the front lines. And this is where information meets action. This is where we need the data to actually interface directly with the warfighter and have the integrity, have the availability, and have the confidentiality ensured. Each of these domains represents both a capability and an exposure. Each one of those is a potential vector. It's a window the adversary can exploit if we're not looking. And what used to be support systems, logistics, IT, maintenance, I come from an intelligence background. I was told constantly, you're here to support the warfighter, right? Same with IT. Same with, from the Navy, cryptological technicians. Everybody's there to support the warfighter. What happens when those systems that are being maintained are actually the domain of warfare now? Suddenly, those are your first line responders. Suddenly, those are your infantrymen. The reason's simple. When we disrupt a supply route, whether it's digitally or otherwise, that's how you achieve, or how our adversaries achieve, the ability to undermine our operational capability. Our adversaries make no distinction between digital and physical in that regard. And I've said this multiple times in other forums. If you've heard the terms cyber Pearl Harbor or cyber 9/11, how many people have heard those terms, right? And here in Hawaii, it's very apropos, because when you say Pearl Harbor, that has a very visceral meaning, especially when you go out to the Arizona Memorial or you see the Utah, and you really understand what Pearl Harbor means in this context. If we're waiting for a cyber Pearl Harbor, we are categorically misunderstanding how our adversaries wage war. They do death by 1,000 cuts. Our adversaries use cyber, and they use cyber capabilities against our logistics, against our supply chain, and they do it intentionally because it stays below the level of armed conflict. If they rise above the level of armed conflict from an international law perspective, they trigger our right to self-defense. If you're going to trigger that, you're going to use a cruise missile. You're going to use a blunt force object. You're not going to use cyber anymore. So if we're waiting for a cyber Pearl Harbor, if we're waiting for something to go boom in our electric grid, we are misunderstanding how this actually works. So let's zoom into what our operational backbone actually looks like. From classified networks to logistic chains, or to logistic supply chains, from the command post to the flight line, every single system, every data set on this slide, it represents a strength for our warfighter, for our capabilities, but it also represents that vulnerability. And this is what we mean when we say from the foundations to the front line of digital sovereignty. Every data category listed here is a mission dependency. You can start with the crown jewels, and we could look at the classified mission plans, the objectives, the timelines, contingency routes, rules of engagement, all the way to the C3 data, the lifeline commanders rely upon, that units are relying upon to ensure that the orders are effective, to ensure that the information that's being passed is viable, that the integrity is secured. Geolocation and movement data, the real-time troop movement, vehicles, supply lines, depots, meetups, all of that geolocation data is relied upon from an integrity perspective. More and more, we're integrating AI capabilities into these very tools, into these very capabilities to ensure that the systems not only operate appropriately and efficiently, but also that we are using or making most efficient use of our capabilities and of our time and of our resources. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR feeds, these are drones, satellites, SIGINT, humans, raw, unprocessed, and processed data. All of these feeds relied on integrity and availability to bring information and intelligence directly to our frontline fighters. Targeting and fire control, the coordinates. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but imagine if you are able to poison data sets. And think for a second from an AI perspective. And we use AI, how many people have used ChatGPT today, right? This morning, or Claude, or pick one. All of the different decisions, all of the questions that you're asking, we're trying to bring these same capabilities to the front lines to really make more efficient decision-making processes. Well, what if we know that we need to go after a Chinese rail station that is bringing forces from the center of mainland China all the way to the coast in preparation for an invasion of Taiwan? If we know that, and we know the timing of those trains, and we want to interfere with them, or we want to prevent that from happening, and we have an authorized strike, what are we going to do to target those trains? Well, we have cyber capabilities we can certainly use. We've got kinetic capabilities we can certainly use. But how are we actually targeting them? How are we making the best decision possible? Right now, we're in the process of developing AI to make those decisions for our commanders, for that targeting data, to come up with an actual targeting package that's going to use the most efficient weapon, the most efficient tool that we possibly can. The problem with that is Anthropic just sponsored a really important, really interesting study that was published earlier this month. No matter the size of the LLM, it takes 250 bad documents to poison the entire model. So imagine if we have a targeting model that's specifically helping us to pick out the weapons that are being used and the sites that are being targeted. And that all of a sudden is poisoned by our adversaries using no more than 250 documents. Suddenly, we don't have trust in our targeting. We don't have trust in our ability to project power and to wage war. That's the kind of challenge that we're running into when we cross over between operational technology and AI. And we always talk about securing our IT infrastructure and cybersecurity, but in large part, we're focused on the CIA triad. And what we're talking about today is we need to take those same applications and we need to look at the operational implementation of AI and how that crosses over with operational technology. You can have the best precision strike capability in the world. If you can't trust it, you can't use it. And that's the key takeaway. There we go. So this is the bright line, right? The silver lining and all this. How do we defend our dependencies? I'm pleased to say it doesn't take rocket scientists, although we are happy to have those in our midst as well. It really starts with 5 pillars. And they're not buzzwords. And the 5 pillars that I like to espouse are these: access, visibility, interoperability, control, and resilience. And this isn't just for IT systems, but primarily focused on operational technology and AI. What's access? Access is your front door. This is the who or the what gets in and under what conditions. Think of it as zero trust, but zero trust applied to AI. Zero trust applied to operational technology and not just our IT systems. Too many OT environments still operate on implicit trust. Shared credentials, open ports, and vendor VPNs that are left running all compromise this inherently. Zero trust has to extend beyond IT. And this is something that we have to apply and we have to take very seriously and use as something more than just a buzzword. The second one is visibility. Anybody who served in the military is very familiar when I talk about the radar picture or what's coming up on your HUD. This radar picture, this visibility into your environment, this allows you to know what every endpoint and what every interdependency actually is. Anytime I've asked any commander or any prime contractor who's supporting these types of missions, you ask for a live map of the OT assets. You can ask for a network map. And all day long, you're going to have a J6 who's going to be able to provide you a network map of their IT environment. Ask for a network map of an OT environment and see what you're produced, or see what's produced for you. These are exactly the spaces that our adversaries are targeting. It's our lack of visibility. So understanding what is actually visible within our OT environment is critically important. Beyond that, though, it's not just the OT environment. Then you have to ask, what are the other tools that are being used across our IT and our OT environment? And this is the AI space. Has anyone heard the term shadow AI? It's a lot of fun, right? These are new words. I'm a lawyer. I love words and definitions. It's great. So shadow IT, how about that one? People know what shadow IT is. People are bringing things into your environment. They're saying, well, I'm going to use my personal device because it's just a lot easier for me to do. Shadow AI is the same thing. As AI and AI tools, GPTs, LLMs become more and more ubiquitous, more and more people are starting to develop their own AI capabilities. You can go and vibe code your way right into your own AI model. But if you're using that model to gain efficiencies in your job and you're applying that to a government system or a contractor system, and your command or your company doesn't have visibility into the AI tool, you are introducing vulnerabilities into your entire system. And if those AI tools are being leveraged to support OT environments, you just introduce vulnerabilities into your operational technology. That's a big problem. And it's something that we don't talk enough about and getting our heads around when we're dealing with shadow AI, shadow IT. This goes to control. Control is that command authority for the digital domain. It's who issues the orders. How do we verify that they're legitimate? How do you ensure that what's coming out of an AI tool in the either operational environment or in operational technology was actually issued by the person or the machine that was supposed to issue it, and it's not coming from an adversary? In the age of automation and autonomous AI agent, control equals containment. If you can definitively control your environment, you can ensure that an adversary is not in there and is not injecting bad commands or bad tools into your environment, thereby affecting your supply chain, thereby affecting operations. Every instruction to a system from a control perspective needs to be traceable, it needs to be validated, and it needs to be reversible, which is key whenever we're taking data and ingesting it also for training the models that we're utilizing. And then finally, and the most important one on here, is resilience. Any good IT network defender or cybersecurity professional will tell you it's not a matter of if, but when. The best defenses will eventually be tested. And when they're tested, we need to make sure that our technology, our OT environments, our AI capabilities are resilient to fight through the incident that occurs. They're able to fight through the attack. Because if you can't fight through and maintain operational capability, you're not of any use on the front line. And if we're relying on these for our warfighters, our systems that are supporting those warfighters can't be trusted and aren't resilient, we're not going to last very long in major combat operations. So, wrapping this up, while we're reinforcing our foundations, our adversaries continue to move faster than ever. Here are just a couple of very recent ones. And I talked about Everest. That didn't make it to the slide because it quite literally happened this morning. But that tells you the pace at which these types of incidents, these types of attacks and targeting continue to occur. But let's break down what we're actually seeing. Supply chain backdoors continue to be a big problem. How many people have heard of SolarWinds? Right? SolarWinds is one of the big ones, affected about 18,000 companies and government agencies nationwide. That was Russian SVR, their foreign intelligence service. How do we know that SolarWinds wasn't pre-positioning of a cyber weapon? We don't. Did we hold Russia accountable for SolarWinds? We didn't. Do we know why? Two reasons. One, we don't want to be hypocrites. And if we are targeting their software supply chain, we don't want them coming back and saying the NSA or Cyber Command is equally as culpable. Number two, our legal mechanisms don't allow us to. Espionage is not illegal under international law. Only acts of war are. And so if something doesn't go boom, we can't actually do anything in response unless we're willing to take it to the next level and escalate. And our escalation ladder currently doesn't permit us to do so. What about Volt Typhoon? And I know I've already asked for a show of hands on this one. Volt Typhoon is also critically important in the sense that that was targeting the electric grid. We know not for espionage, but for pre-positioning. Also something that we're not able to respond to because it doesn't rise to the level of an act of war. But those are just two examples. We're talking about supply chain. We've also seen this in the commercial sector where Chinese-made components like solar inverters and industrial controllers have hidden communication modules that are reaching right back to Beijing. Those that can be remotely activated to disrupt local grids, or exfiltrate data. We know this, we see it, we're trying to eradicate them from the supply chain, but it takes time, and a rip and replace isn't necessarily the answer. We also see state actor intrusions. We talked about Volt Typhoon. There's also others. And so these are the big ones that really make the news. But what about AI-driven influence operations? Has anyone heard of the company, the Chinese company Galaxy? It's worth a Google. It's a good one. So the National Security Institute at Vanderbilt published a trove of documents about Galaxy in the last month. Galaxy is a virtual persona manufacturing company, so to speak. They develop virtual personas that are geared specifically towards targeting individuals. They either masquerade as real people or they masquerade as people for the purposes of conducting social engineering or pushing propaganda. So think about all the data that's being collected from TikTok. And think about all that data being put into a virtual persona manufacturing company that is then using that to spread propaganda and individually target either our warfighters or our decision makers. All of that information space, all of this is to say, as we more and more move into the AI space, it's not enough to just be focusing on our technology. It's also important to be focusing on our people and the information that they may or may not be sharing with adversaries knowingly or wittingly or unwittingly. And we get to hybrid ransomware. Everest is a great example of this, but another one is Warlock. And Warlock is a Chinese ransomware group that's directly tied to the MSS. It's been conducting fairly significant operations targeting critical infrastructure. We know that they have ties to MSS, but again, because they are a criminal activity, we have to focus and rely on the FBI as opposed to using military capabilities to defend ourselves. These are all part of the larger domain, and these are all things that we need to look at, because when you put it all together, here's what it means. We're not facing random actors or criminal groups that are targeting our networks. We're facing motivated nation states who are well-resourced, who are working together with both their proxies and amongst each other to target our information technology and to target our operational technology. The more we rely and the more we come to rely on our critical dependencies with AI, the bigger the problem is going to become. Nope, that's not it. That's the one. So, final slide. When you strip away the headlines, AI, geopolitical chess, when we look at all of this, what actually makes these attacks possible is right here in our own environments. Operational technology were never designed for constant connectivity or persistent threats. They're designed for reliability, not resilience. Which means, in too many cases, the threats that we see in operational technology, it's not sophisticated. It's systemic. It has to do with our people. It has to do with the way our networks are architected. Let's start with the human in the process layer. What we're seeing as critical vulnerabilities on the IT side, we're also seeing this on the OT side. We're also seeing this on the AI side. Deferred patching, poor key management, no multi-factor authentication on engineering functions, limited logging and monitoring, which prevents us from being able to conduct follow-on investigations, weak vendor oversight or no vendor oversight, as well as shadow IT, shadow AI, and configuration drift, where systems are evolving much faster than the documentation does, or the policies do. Law typically follows technology by a pretty large margin. This is also true within organizations from a policy perspective. None of it sounds dramatic. And when you talk about all these things, it's the kind of the, oh yeah, no, we get it. Like, we're all here at TechNet, we're tech folks. This is how you fix any network. Yeah, but we're not applying it to OT. And we're not applying it to AI. Together, this creates a perfect storm of compromise that our adversaries are able to exploit, and they're actively exploiting. There's also a technical layer, though. And that's the code, that's the firmware, that's the architecture itself. And what we're seeing more and more on the OT side, outdated PLCs and SCADA systems, many of them are more than 15 years old, far past the end of life, far past many of the companies that actually founded those technologies and fielded them. Hard-coded credentials that can't be changed without downtime, unsupported operating systems, weak or no encryption for data in transit, exposed engineering workstations or those that are forward-facing, unmonitored industrial IoT systems. You put all of it together, and this is exactly what our adversaries have been dreaming about for years. Persistent, low-friction access to our operational technology, to our very war-fighting capability. And we've seen how it's manifesting itself operationally. We've seen it through SolarWinds. We've seen it through Volt Typhoon. We're seeing it more and more through ransomware and other groups and other proxies that are targeting our systems. So as we move forward, I want you to keep this picture in mind. We're going to talk next about the new dimension and what is accelerating all of this and all of the challenges that we're facing. And that's going to be the incorporation of AI into everything. And I asked some of you, how many people have used ChatGPT today? Think about how many times you've used AI just over the past week, both knowingly and unknowingly. Because if I asked you how many times did you use Google this week, every single person would put their hands up and say multiple times. Every input you put into Google is use of an AI tool now. Now imagine that happening in our operational technology. Imagine that happening for our warfighters. And imagine that AI becoming more and more of a threat. When artificial intelligence becomes truly autonomous and drives our operations, it's embedded into operational technology, that's when the machines start making their own decisions. That's an area that we really need to be focusing on from a trust perspective and ensuring that we're securing it appropriately. So with that, I'll happily turn it over to Kat to give you a brighter future.
Well, if they're here for a brighter future, it's not going to be with me. Hello, everyone. The lawyer has jokes, so I have jokes too. But before I unpack this gem of a slide, a couple of quick things for you. Number one, I love coming to Indo-Pac because when I look out into this gorgeous audience, everyone looks tan. And my motto is if you can't tone it, tan it. Am I right? Well, I did walk by a guy coming in here that looked like he tried, but it wasn't working. The second thing is I have more coffee in my system than blood right now. So you're going to get a lot of spicy. You're going to get a lot of stories and you're going to get a lot of sound bites. So buckle up. The third is I see y'all taking notes, pictures of these slides. These are fun slides. Come to us afterwards. We'll just email it to you. Okay. So just have fun. Okay. AI and everything. Sounds great until we realize, as Michael said earlier, it includes missile guidance, HVAC systems, vending machines selling Red Bulls in military facilities. We used to worry about candy drops, right? This is nothing new. Admiral Kohler mentioned this earlier. We've always been adapting. And you know you're in cyber when you listen to 50 Cent's song and you're singing, I'll hit you with a candy drop instead of I'll take you to the candy shop. Either way, the era of new non-human identities is upon us, and these have been here for over a decade now. They're not new, right? They sign digital requests, they talk to other machines. This is all happening without a human touching a single keyboard. The crazier thing, though, is we're not applying critical zero trust principles to any of this, right? We have mechanisms in place to make sure that humans verify their authenticity, but we don't have this for AI or non-human identities, and we need it. So I would encourage you guys, as you think about Indo-Pac TechNet, start thinking about non-human identities, agentic AI, and then the need for AI SPM, security posture management. It's going to be a big thing, and we really need it. Okay, AI. True AI can be amazing for efficiency. I am not here to tell you that we need to take it out or stop investing. Quite the opposite. We will not win without it. However, it is terrifying for security. Think about it. Predictive maintenance models could quietly decide to save resources by skipping aircraft diagnostics. Even if we tell it not to, there's no telling that it can't. The AI logistics planner could optimize supply chains, accidentally rerouting medical shipments to the wrong island, all while insisting it's correct because of improperly trained or poisoned data sets. The list goes on and on. We don't have a policy for this because we never envisioned in a future where this would exist. So as we think about it, as you all make decisions on putting AI into your operations, into your platforms, first ask yourself, is it truly AI or is it just some machine learning on steroids? And then secondly, does it need to be, right? We don't always have to use a tool just because we have it at our disposal. If we think we can anticipate all the permutations where an AI could operate, we would be wrong. If we think we can predict all the things that AI can do, we would be wrong. And if we think we can trust AI, everybody now, we would be wrong. So let's take a look at this special little nightmare factory of scenarios where AI has already proven that it is not trustworthy. Is there a trick to this? Yeah, I'm hitting the green one. All right.
Okay, for those in the room who like to collect reasons to drink or hate sleep, here's a fun little slide of examples where AI has done exactly like that. Jumped out of sandboxes, infiltrated OT, or weaponized AI for political or financial gain. Anybody here alive in the 80s? Thank you. Okay, all right. You were kind of alive in the 80s? Oh, okay. Sounds good. All right. Morris worm, originally designed to survey the size of the internet, ended up infecting every single computer or device that it touched and rapidly disabled global network systems, right? There was a huge problem, took off the entirety of the internet, self-propagating code, no bueno. Stuxnet, 15-year anniversary. Ali and I are thinking about getting matching lower back tattoos, so if anybody wants to vote on that, let us know. Originally designed to infiltrate Iranian centrifuges, ended up affecting other nations' nuclear power plant, effectively turning malware code into kinetic damage. ChatGPT, this was last year, 2024, ladies and gentlemen. Security researchers activated weaponized LLM to autonomously solve exploit challenges, giving GPT a very clear set of guidelines that require them to stay within a sandbox environment to capture the flag. Well, guess what? It ended up escaping the sandbox environment, exploited a Docker misconfiguration, and completed the assignment. So it technically did what it was supposed to do, but it did not follow the rules and the guidelines in which it was required to do. It's like talking to children, telling them not to do something, and then they go in and do the exact thing you told them not to do. Okay, smart homes. We're talking about OT. This was at DEF CON this year, August 2025. Hackers leveraged Gemini and malware code in a calendar description. So you know when a friend sends you account or invite, puts a description in there, this was malware code, right? They got Gemini to more or less execute that malware code that then synced to the smart home and turned off lights and opened windows. Now, those might seem very benign, but in the instance where it is unlocking your doors or turning on your heater or maybe even your oven, that could be very unwanted behavior. Jeep. This was in 2015. Right? On YouTube, you can go on there right now, and hackers are showing you how they remotely hijack Jeep Cherokees through their Uconnect system, cutting engines on the highway, proving that you could turn a Jeep Cherokee into a 2-ton paperweight. I got some nods over there. Yes, I do. I guess we know why they call it bricking. All right. This is one of my favorites. The Hong Kong deepfake heist. And you think it can't be done, and they did it. Criminals used AI-generated video and voice to impersonate a company CFO, convincing the employees to transfer $25 million. If I were a better cyber criminal, I'd be so much richer. Oh my gosh. So deepfake voiced engineer might authorize a control center to do a firmware update, deploy malicious code, and then make its way into industrial controllers. All right, so let's put this in real life. If you think that it can't happen today, it can. This is a photo of Ali King and myself at Singaporean International Cyber Week a year ago. I was walking through the expo hall, very similar to the one here, and I saw my face on a screen. Somebody had a camera pointed at people walking around and replacing their faces with celebrities. Now, I'm not going to think about the legal implications. Get a drink with Mike later if you want to on that front. But you can see this is a photo of me and Ali that night just to compare what I was wearing to what was on there. But they took my face and put Taylor Swift's face on it. So as long as I didn't have like jerky movements, it was perfect. Like this is how different flavors of this is where North Korea is applying for jobs in the US and completing employment fraud, right? These are how North Korea is obfuscating themselves within shell corporations and hiring our government engineers as subject matter experts to steal trade secrets and other information. And if things continue to persist, I mean, they just stole 1.5 billion in crypto and the greatest crypto heist in the history of mankind. I'm pretty sure we're going to continue seeing a lot of this propagate. I think you guys can understand what this could mean in the Indo-Pac from a command and control standpoint, and just messing with our ability to respond with confidence, and immediacy. So I just want to reiterate that this is all compromising our ability to trust each other, our systems, our platforms, all thanks to AI. Again, I'm not saying we shouldn't pursue it. I'm just saying we have to be really careful. All right, let's move on. Is this? Okay. Yeah. Now, we talked about convergence, and let's get a little crazier. Quantum. That's right, I said it. Now, before we all roll our eyes, I want to acknowledge the fact that quantum isn't a pipe dream, nor is it 10 years out. It is not a pipe dream, nor is it 10 years out, okay? We all need to be taking 2 healthy scoops of quantum resilience in our morning coffee every day because it is here, all right? The ones in the room that understand that we already are using quantum principles and technologies on the market today, they're the ones that are going to understand how this changes the game from tic-tac-toe to 3-dimensional chess. We need to be prioritizing security with some major big defense energy. AI, or as I would like to argue, ML on steroids, is being forcefully injected into everything. Again, the 6 examples that I gave earlier, think about whether or not it's really AI. Think about whether or not it really needs to have it. Number 2, if you're in the business of cybersecurity, Michael mentioned it earlier, you are in the business of key management. You are in the business of cryptography, whether you realize it or not. Every sensor, Admiral Kohler mentioned that earlier, every sensor rating, every machine-to-machine handshake, every model, it relies on our ability to safeguard the integrity of that data. Post-quantum resilience needs to be prioritized today. Human in the middle isn't enough. You're telling me that you're going to put a human in the middle who barely had enough energy to maintain all of the systems that he or she is responsible for, let alone you're also going to ask that individual to monitor the AI for doing anything naughty? I don't think so. It seems like a pretty daunting task. We cannot expect that a human in the middle is just automatically going to take all of our risk away. Probably better than nothing, but it's not the solution. Data poisoning, AI poisoning, equals operational paralysis. Mike talked about this extensively, so I won't get into it. OT devices weren't meant to exist for 10 plus years, let alone the 40 plus years that it's going on right now. So sensor data is highly critical, but there are areas where AI injected it could be doing really great things. So for instance, you could take Hawaii's critical infrastructure sensor data, hook it up to AI, and use real-time sensors from streams and pumps, meters, sensors, chlorine residuals, pH probes, and all this great information to train to detect against anomalies or predict failures, quality excursions before they become emergencies, right? So this would prevent public health incidents by catching contamination. It could reduce unplanned downtime and costly emergency repairs. All of this would not only benefit civilians, but more importantly, it benefits the DIP. It lowers chemical and energy waste. All this great stuff can happen with AI, but we have to be prepared for the alternate use case as well. All right, we talked about cryptographic resilience and high-value assets. We don't even know where some of them live. So Michael was talking about the fact that there's shadow IT, shadow AI. Do we know where it is? Do we know what it's accessing? Let's find out, because that's going to be step 1 in making sure that we're ready for the AI quantum convergence. Lastly, we have a panel later this afternoon right here at 2 p.m. where we're talking about zero trust at the edge of Indo-Pac. Anybody who is curious about how we would suggest approaching zero trust for an AI-enabled world, I would highly recommend that you come to that as well, just to say that I'm sure everybody in here who cares about it already has thought about the implications. There's a lot of good conversation happening there too. All right, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Allie, who's going to drop some brain snacks on key vulnerabilities within OT in particular and how we secure the mission.
Okay, so it's difficult for me to see this slide, but I don't need to read it to you because you can see it already. And so what's unique about Forescout, in addition to all the other vendors that are here, is that we have a world-class research group out of Eindhoven in the Netherlands. that are currently monitoring 750 threat actors, 100 plus ransomware groups that leak site data, and we also monitor over 39 billion unique data points over 1,500 global sites. And so that information you can get from Forescout monthly newsletter. So there's no marketing gimmicks or anything like that incorporated in there. So as soon as we are able to validate and understand and synthesize this information, which I consider to be timely threat intel, we do provide that more broadly. And so I would encourage you to use that resource moving forward, because you can have what we have and all the other top leading groups also leverage within their tool sets and platforms and other things that continue to move forward. So we are kind of squeezed on time, but that's okay, because I do think Michael and Kat provided you with a masterclass on the challenges but opportunities that we have moving forward. And so what I want to be able to round things out with is, okay, at the high policy level, whether it's Office of Secretary of Defense, members of Congress, or the White House, like, what is the approach moving forward? What is the political will? And also to open things up so we can have some questions from the audience. So we're just not talking at you. We can have your input as well. So there we go. So as you can see here, some of the Forescout data that we have, we can get into more of the specifics from a systems engineering perspective. Everything's on the table. Anything that's connected is vulnerable. And we do work across 70 different departments and agencies within the federal space to be able to help them have a better appreciation of every single endpoint. There is a strong preference within the DoD to solely focus on traditional IT, which I think is an incredible mistake, because that is something that they understand and recognize. There's a comfort level with business systems, but we do know that over the course of time, these networks are porous. And if you had traditional OT networks, they have permeated more broadly into a much broader attack space. And so when anybody says zero trust, but for IT, that is bullshit, okay? Like, zero trust is like the entire enchilada. You can't segment this and only focus on one thing. I like Randy Resnick, but he's going to have to cha-cha a little bit faster on rolling out policy guidance that then will allow different components to be able to put that in their budget so they can buy tools and capabilities to be able to defend their networks, because we got a 27 date that we need to ensure that we are building resiliency across our entire battle space, which extends beyond your business systems. It extends beyond your bases. You have to be able to leave base or the port to execute your mission. And so it's vitally important for us to be able to have a better appreciation for all these different things that are critical to your ability to project power. Okay. I think Kat and Michael also kind of talked a little bit more about challenges around the threat actors and how they've evolved over time. So this is a good reference point. Again, we'll give you the slides, but I'll keep moving a little bit faster. We've got some more of the Forescout dashboards, and the information here is available online, but I'll make sure you get those newsletters as we discussed. And again, so here's where we get into more of like the solution sets, because there are things that we can do. It's not boiling the ocean here. I know that a lot of folks are like, well, it's just too big of a problem, so I'm just going to pretend that my limited resources are going to go towards things that I'm comfortable with. But in reality, you have to have a risk-based approach to what you are willing to invest in, the tools and the things that need to be protected moving ahead. And so, just one second, so I can't really see the slides. So, identify your critical systems. You can't protect everything, so you do need to have an understanding of what does need to have continuous visibility, and you need to be able to understand what you can do from an automation perspective, because there is a human fatigue that goes along with being able to ensure that you're buying down risk to your mission. And so that's the first thing that we have up here. more broadly speaking, critical infrastructure, everything the DoD uses and leverages to execute its mission, about 80% of that is owned and operated by the private sector. Now, what the military does, the Title 10, and to some extent Coast Guard, because even though they're part of DHS, they do have other authorities to be able to execute Title 50 perspective. All that OT that they're operating on, like, there's nothing unique or special about it. DoD likes to pretend that they are special, but really they have the same risk exposure as anybody else when it comes to transportation, port infrastructure, those types of things. And so it's really important for them to understand risk to the mission and being able to extrapolate that more broadly. Again, the visibility piece is so important. Asset inventory is kind of like chewing solid food, but as we discussed, like, they can't tell you what their OT asset exposure is, even though it is a requirement and has been a requirement for a really long time. They really struggle with that. So if you don't know what your assets are and your endpoints, like, you really are in a world of hurt from, kind of traditional incompetence, but also malfeasance more broadly from a sophisticated nation state. So that's certainly an issue. The OT grants piece is more for the state level, tribal, territorial governments who are responsible for being able to manage these things. Think of like water systems and remote places where there isn't a high margin, profit margin for these folks, so they really struggle to invest. I've spoken to folks that have been responsible for water plants, and they're like, I don't have any money, and if I did, I'm using $1 to buy chlorine. I understand and appreciate that, but we've already seen nation states pre-positioning across water systems, and it can only lead to more terrible things. So the grant program's important. That's a long-term tool. In the interim, for some of these companies, we can give them tax write-offs because then that elevates it to a business decision at a board level. And so that allows them to buy more of these tools and have these capabilities that the DoD, whether they admit it or not, they absolutely do rely on. As we kind of move a little further down the line here, the intelligence sharing, of course, what needs to happen, and I hate to say this because I know, like, you and I just, we have our own issues with it. So CMMC is not a panacea. And Michael will tell you that, the department had two issues. They had nation state actors are attacking us and contractors are lying to us. They decided to solve the contractors are lying to us problem, and then kind of masquerade a little bit more in terms of, oh, well, this is going to save you from the nation state APT actors. It's just not true. There's certainly a level of resiliency that you'll have by doing CMMC, but it's not going to help you with the Chinese or the Russians. And so the challenge that we have now is, you've heard of Golden Dome. I know that they're calling it some other, less sexy names, but ultimately, Golden Dome's a giant OT sandwich when you think about it. You have your facilities, you have your sensors, you have your networks, you have your weapon systems. Those are all OT. And so right now within CMMC, there's nothing that addresses OT, right? The Dragnet is the CUI piece, but there's nothing in there that's going to help you. And when I last spoke to the acting DoD CIO, she said, oh, well, table stakes for Golden Dome are going to be CMMC level 3, which means that if you're part of Caresoft and you're not a giant company, you're off. You're out the table. So somebody who specializes in this, there's a lot of companies here, they wouldn't even qualify. And then they said, oh, I'm going to lean on NIST 800-172. Again, there's no OT in there. And so we need to leverage the domain expertise that exists within industry. And this needs to be something that all of our COCOM commanders understand. It's an operational imperative. It's not just some like backwater IT issue. Because as we discussed, this virtual domain is permeating more and more into the decisions that we make every single day. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to spend close to $1 trillion in our defense budget and then fall short being able to execute basic functions. And so, again, when you think of OT, I know that it's not as interesting as some of the other areas of traditional warfare, but it's something that we certainly are behind the ball and need to make every effort to approach this from a place of priority and increase urgency. So I think we're kind of running low on time, but we wanted to open up for questions. Okay.
Not everyone at once, though.
Good afternoon, everybody. Name's Perry. I'm with Forescout. One thing that really caught and continues to catch my eye is this idea of over-confidentiality. In our OT systems, we have to rely on sub-second data to make decisions, and it's highly dependent, as you alluded to, with AI and learning models. If we get into a point to where we're looking at confidentiality down in that domain, it's going to take a supercompute quantum idea to run on these purpose-built scaled systems. How, and just kind of open question, but how do we bridge the gap to ensure availability but still provide the confidentiality without having just a 4-button code on an old PLC to where a dude has to hand jam it before the fire goes live?
Perry, do you know what a double wrap burrito is?
I do not.
Let me break it down for you.
All right.
Okay. Any Taco Bell fans in here? And oh, my people. Okay. So 2 things. The first is quantum technology is a sliding scale, right? I talked about this at length. We cannot be thinking about quantum technology as a super far off distant view. The more qubits that we add to this shit, the smarter it gets and the faster we go. There's already quantum technologies that are being put in place right now. So the compute capabilities, we're pushing we as this, I guess, humanity is pushing the boundaries of what can be aggregated from what I call ML on steroids to gather all that sensor information, and then it requires very strong, well-trained AI data in order to do something with it. Now, what I mean by double wrap burrito is that you've got your classical computing capabilities and your classical algorithms for encryption. That's how we protect the data. However, we also, NIST has produced these as well, and so have international standardization bodies. They've already produced post-quantum algorithms that you can also put onto the data set as well. So it's like a double wrap burrito. We're encrypting our shit from classical computing, and then we're going to put another Crunchwrap Supreme around the outside for quantum. Now, it makes it a lot heavier when we can go to the details, but if it were me behind the wheel and I see all of this data, first I decide what is worth protecting, then I decide how I'm going to protect it, and is that going to, how does that change my risk profile from a uptime standpoint? It's a big conversation, one that I think needs to happen at a almost executive level, and then every agency therein makes the call.
And without taking too much more time, but in talking to the idea of quantum, you have this wonderful supernova of an idea that you have an always on, always off bit. So you basically always have the answer just with a straight line key. So again, wrapping, double wrapping, all the different ideas there. Does confidentiality really solve the issues when you can get an always 1.5?
Yeah, so I think we're talking about 2 different things, right? And so ideally, when we are dealing with confidentiality, if you look at the CIA triad, confidentiality is primarily focused on how do you protect the data itself from unwanted eyes, right? And this is the idea behind CMMC, where we're trying to protect controlled unclassified information. When you're dealing with operational technology, confidentiality is really less of a concern unless you're talking about trade secrets that are related directly to that operational technology, and something the divulgence of which would create unto itself either an existential threat or allow someone to develop capabilities to either counter or to match that capability. That's really the confidentiality aspect. On the operational technology side, though, outside of trade secrets, outside of intellectual property, we're not so much focused on confidentiality. We're really focused on integrity and availability. Because for OT, the integrity is critically important when we start layering on AI, because if you don't have integrity in the data, you don't have trust in the output of that data, because then you have poison data sets. You have poison training data that ends up poisoning the models, and then you have unpredictable outcomes. On the availability side, it's not so much on the poison, it's the actual uptime. And so that's why when we're talking about operational technology, and this is where we really try to distinguish between things like CMMC, the NIST 800, 171, 172, that really focus exclusively on confidentiality. With OT, we need to flip that, and we need to focus not on the C, we need to focus on the integrity and the availability of that data. And even more so when we start to get in talking about quantum, because quantum really has nothing to do with the confidentiality side of things when you're dealing with operational technology. Quantum is the way in which we can perform high-level computations very, very quickly in such a way that it's going to expedite our decision-making process. All of that has to do with the integrity of the data input and the data output, and then the availability of those systems. That answer the question? We can go all day. Buy me a beer later. I love this.
I know the AV guy in the bag's like, no, wrap up. Can you tell I'm hungry with the double wrap burrito comment? Come on.
It's almost lunchtime. Any other questions?
Anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Hey, good morning. My name is Saran Cole. This question is more tailored towards Michael. In the battle of the best AI model, whatever country comes first, do you think the lack of AI regulations and laws in Russia and China will make their AI innovate quicker compared to the US and Europe?
You're under the assumption that laws in Russia and China matter. And I don't mean that flippantly. China in particular, beginning in 2015, started rolling out a series of laws dealing directly with data that's crossing their borders or that their companies are in control of. And so the national security law, the national intelligence law, and the cybersecurity law all say that any data resident on any network in China or any company that's incorporated in China, without subpoena, without warrant, is subject to inspection by the Chinese government. Not only that, but the Chinese government can have direct access to any of those networks. It's the same thing with AI. They don't limit the focus on their networks to just data. They don't limit to just IT infrastructure. It's any computerized system. Therefore, the laws in China already say they have direct access. The Ministry of State Security, the Ministry of Public Security within China, and the People's Liberation Army, if they want to access the data or if they want to access AI models in China, they can. So the law itself, it bends towards the Chinese Communist Party, bends towards their own civilian military complex. In Russia, it's a little bit different, but Russia, because of the way in which they operate as an oligarchy, they are directly supporting, essentially making up rules as they go along. And so in the same way as they leverage their states, either their state agencies or state entities, or they leverage proxies in cyber operations, they're also leveraging those same capabilities from a collection standpoint and from a tooling standpoint. And we've seen that on the ground in Ukraine pretty extensively over the past couple of years, vis-a-vis their military-industrial complex and the way in which they incorporate new technologies from Iran, from North Korea, and from China into their warfighting capability. I would say in those two jurisdictions in particular, the law is pliable, and that's probably putting it mildly. And so it's less of a what does the law say they can do and what can they get away with.
One thing that I would add to that too, there's already been research, right? You're talking about essentially your AI. Economic security is national security. Economic security is national security. Whatever we build as IP, either in defense or in commercial, that is our economic security. And nation states will stop at nothing to steal that. There's already been research indicating that if you have very high quality data, maybe like 1,000 different data points, you can get, with quantum computing capabilities, you can get to the same level of acceptable deviation than 200x number of data sets. Meaning I can train my AI models on a lot less data as long as the fidelity is really high. So I would say as you think about developing highly effective, very strong AI, focus more on the data that you're putting into. It's like the food we put in our bodies. Like if you eat healthy, you will live longer. Same principle.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Let us know if we can send you the deck, and thanks for the time.